Modern concrete and cement is a technology of immense value, one that has been only revived within the last few hundred years. Writers of recent centuries discussing the ancient art of artificial stone have pointed to this very treatise and its author, Richard Holt, as the progenitor, resurrecting an ancient practice. The treatise does not mention a recipe though, and neither did his patent, which was completed in 1722, along with architect Thomas Ripley. It seems that Mr. Holt held this field to himself until roughly 1729, for in this year, a rival appeared on the scene. This rival, named Batty Langley, seemed to spur this very treatise from his apparent attempts to discover Holt's secret of the ancients. Within these pages, Richard Holt dismisses Portland stone as unreliable and Bath stone as dangerously flawed, arguing instead that the ancients distrusted natural stone and developed an artificial alternative that surpassed it in quality. Holt even proposes that monuments such as Stonehenge and even the Egyptian pyramids were constructed from this superior material. Now, are these merely eccentric musings of a madman? His firm belief in the superiority of his artificial stone would state otherwise. It was seemingly underpinned by extensive research and travels in pursuit of ancient formulas. So does this renaissance of manufactured stone begin here? Within the following pages, Mr. Holt states a collective regret on behalf of humanity that this art of the ancients, their secret and mystery in this particular, has died and been buried with them. Many ages have suffered, and future times will have reason to remember the effects of this unspeakable loss. Therefore, we read. If the maxim of philosophers be true, that the seeds of good and evil glide along with the blood, 'tis no wonder that your lordship is so eminent for all the graces, and for all the virtues that adorn the human mind, and become the man of quality. Your lordship inherits all the transcendent faculties of your ancestors' minds, as well as their most opulent estates, and not only represent the family and the most illustrious name of the Boyles, but also the very nature, the singular talents, the most memorable actions of your progenitors. Your lordship treads their very footsteps and follows them close. In all that's truly great and good, your forefathers, my lord, have so signalized themselves in the arts and sciences, that you are, as 'twere, engaged to go on in the same way, and at last to accept of the great reward, immortal glory. I have neither pen nor parts, nor endowments fit for Pangrick. If I had, the Earl of Burlington is so universally well known that it would be the most impertinent attempt. For all the world knows that his soul, the grandeur of his soul, is suitable to his lordship's most noble extraction, and his mind too as extensive as his fortune. Heaven and earth have blessed him, the one with a desire, the other with a power to do good. But to say no more on so great a subject, in short, then, my lord, the Earl of Burlington, is not only the nursing father of all arts and sciences, but also the common father of all artists and men of ingenuity. Where then could I so securely shelter myself and my artificial stone as under your lordship's protection? Your lordship is every way qualified to defend a good cause, and, as you are the best judge both of the use and excellence of this undertaking, I hope I may venture to recommend it boldly to your lordship's tuition, especially since I am able to plead for it, what can never fail. Your lordship's most generous promise, the promise of your countenance and patronage, my lord, was what above all things I ardently wished for. All beginnings have their difficulties, and I have struggled with mine, but from the first day that your lordship was pleased to view my works and to honor me with your most judicious approbation, all my fears, dissidence itself, vanished. 'Tis then, under your powerful influence, my lord, that I hope to raise again artificial stone to its old luster and former credit. How can I fail in the laudable enterprise when your lordship gives this public sanction to my honest endeavors, to my zeal and industry, to retrieve, to rake out, from under the many ruins of time, one of the most ancient arts, that of artificial stone. Artificial stone which is like your lordship's memory, will last forever. My obligations, my lord, can never cease nor my gratitude die, while my life continues, for the height of my ambition is more than satisfied, and fully gratified, in having both the leave and the honor upon this occasion, to subscribe myself with the humblest submission and with all due respect. My lord, your lordship's most obedient, most devoted, and most faithful humble servant, Richard Holt. A short treatise of artificial stone. Architecture and the ornaments of this science was justly held in the highest esteem by the ancients, by the Goths as well as by the Romans, and by the Saxons as well as by the Greeks, as is manifest from the respective orders of most magnificent buildings still extant in this, as well as in the other parts of the world, to the immortal glory of their memories. Nay, the Romans made so much of, and set so high a value on their grand edifices and public buildings of what kind forever, that it was thought an honor too great for the building itself and alone to be trusted with the commemoration of it. But upon erecting a temple, a tower, a harbor, a bridge, an amphitheater, or the like, medals were ordered to be struck, that thereby they might perpetuate and consign the memorial of every such work to all distant places and future times. The fine bustos of their emperors, consuls, generals, etc., with some such piece on the reverse, as are still to be met with among the collections of the antiquarians and rarities of the curious, fully evince the great regard that was justly paid to these monuments of public grandeur. Now among the great many and useful arts encouraged and improved in our happy island, none seem to thrive better, nor to raise its head higher than architecture, which, it is observable, the general spirit of the nation runs daily more and more upon, nor indeed can it make any more generous an attempt, nor attempt anything more commendable in itself, more pleasing to private life, or more engaging to public sight. There are not many so lost to common sensibility as not to conceive delight and take pleasure in viewing a well-finished and embellished structure, belong to who it will. How great then must needs the satisfaction of such proprietors be, especially when their work is so accomplished and done at a small expense. And here, I think, I may venture to say, that our countrymen can never more be supposed to fail in these laudable attempts, considering that we are now enabled by this new invention, which I am just about to lay open to the world, to build, at least to beautify and adorn, full as cheap as ever our ancestors did, even at their penny a day, and that too with all the elegance of Greece and magnificence of Rome itself. For to the immortal honor of our patrons of architecture, be it said, the present taste is the most refined, and of the most perfect kind, free from all Gothic rudeness and monkish foppery, just in its proportions and neat in its embellishments, formed, in short, upon the noble ancient plan, which, however, may admit of infinite variety on account of singularity in fancy or conveniency in building, can never in the main be either excelled or altered to advantage, because it is founded upon the clearest demonstration of truth itself. Now then, I say, when this art is in so happy a way, what a pity it is that the whole kingdom is not adorned with the most graceful private and public buildings, since nothing, sure, can possibly aggrandize a nation more than a general undertaking, a generous emulation, and a polite taste in this great work. A good exterior in a man, we see, commands respects, and why may not the magnificent exterior of a country do the same? Some more public as well as private. Advantages might redound from this, besides employing our poor, which we now maintain at a very chargeable rate, especially since the noblest part of all buildings, the graceful ornaments, may be done in so easy a manner without impairing our strength or wasting our substance. Architecture then being in so flourishing a condition, and the genius of our age being thus happily bent, wherewithal can I more oblige the public than by putting it in this desirable method, and laying a new foundation, not only for the strongest and cheapest decorations of buildings in general, but for the most elegant and beautiful embellishments of all sorts of structures. A small place, well contrived, may have great conveniency, a small spot, well laid out, may have great variety, and a small house, well adorned, may have a grand air and noble look. I have more than once seen a little house and garden that did not cost £1,000, making a finer appearance and casting a more splendid show than another of £10,000 price. And what gentleman, though but of common taste, would not gladly have his seat and house set off to the best advantage, provided it could be done at an easy charge? But hitherto the ornaments of stone and lead have come so high that none but persons of the first rank or amplest fortunes could possibly afford them, whereas in regards to the public, it is the multitude of charms, the numbers of stately and well-adorned edifices that will prove the lasting honor and ornament of our country. And in regard to particulars, I say that by the means of this new discovery, every man may easily gratify himself, readily please his own fancy, and do something towards the gracing of his own habitation, whether great or small. For by it, all former exorbitant charges will dwindle to a trifle, and the greatest designs to be much more effectually answered, as by and by we shall endeavor to make appear. However, in order to this, the reader must indulge me in giving previously some short natural account of stone in general. Next, in particular, of the two sorts most in use here for building and the decorations of buildings. And in doing of this, though I'm far from finding fault with the produce of nature, yet I hope I may freely advert on what's obvious to a very discerning eye, namely that there are common defects in the best natural stone, and extraordinary faults in all the inferior kinds. This will appear plain if we only consider that the hardest of natural stone has no other cement or tie for the combination of its parts than what it acquires from time, either in the bowels of the earth or in the bottom of the sea, where the sand and sandy particles, by a sort of natural trituration, ratifying and fining, incorporate and unite in a lump, and coalesce and hold together in one solid body, however not so firmly at last, but that the agitation and pressure of water, particularly that of rain, drove by the violence of wind, will insinuate and force itself into the interstices and pores, I say, of the strongest and hardest stone, which consisting thus of sand and earthy particles must needs be endued with the natural quality of suction, and as these are gross and dry ingredients, so it must needs powerfully attract the ambient fluid, and readily absorb the imbibe, the insinuating moisture, which again, in process of time and by degrees, occasions that moldering and decay, so visible in all old buildings made by the best of stone. But now, more particularly as to Portland stone, which is most used here in the ornaments of buildings, this is strongly impregnated with nitrous salts, as is evident from its damps and sweats in all wet and very hot weather. And these salts, according as they more or less abound, either make the work brittle, so as that the least trifling accident demolishes it at once, especially in small work, where the substance is not too thick or strong, such as pines, necks, pots, urns, vases, etc., or then in larger substances and stronger work, where more time is required, they gradually eat their way through, and at last the stones crumble to dust and fall out in holes, and hence the holes in the walls of all old and some new houses, so far as they are either built or adorned with this sort of stone. Again, besides this, there is another great fault in Portland stone, as it consists of different tempers. The stonecutters often find, not only in one and the same quarry, but also and very frequently too in one and the same piece, one part pretty hard, as it ought to be, and another very soft, like cheese. This they always reckon a faulty stone, and whatever use it is made on't, can never be supposed to last or hang long together. And a third considerable fault is that vast numbers of clusters of small shells are commonly found in the very bosom and center of the Portland stone, and where this is the case, whatever is made of it is liable to cracks and flaws, and, on every little incident, is ready to fly in pieces. These are the defects and faults of Portland stone, with which I am best acquainted. There may be more that I know nothing about. Now, as to the Bath stone, so famous for its softness and cutting all over like cheese, which is also used for the ornamental part of some buildings. This is of a nature and quality much inferior to the Portland stone, wherefore, of consequence, it is not only subject to all the faults and defects in it, and that too in a much greater degree, but it may also be too many more. For as this stone is a spongy body, compounded of extreme soft and yielding particles, which, besides the pores common to all stones in general, contain within themselves many more considerable faculties. So upon sufficient experience, I dare say, 'twill be found altogether unfit for solid use and long service. 'Tis certain that this Bath stone is not so much as portable from the quarry, much less than can it be converted to use, so as to be erected or set up in any shape, before it has acquired a certain exterior or coat, peculiar to itself, commonly called its hard face, or scurf, which requires a very long airing or standing in the weather, I am told, for 2 or 3 years, before it can either be exposed to carriage or applied to any useful end, except to be upon the spot. And in this weathering or airing, if any of the first seasons prove wet, the attraction of this porous body, the suction of its loose and pervious texture, is so strong, and consequently the quantity of imbibed water so great, that any hard frost succeeding nips the stone, seizes the water, and demolishes, at least endangers, the work made of it, whatever it be. Or, if at this rate the fabric does not immediately fall to pieces, a few years discover it to be, like many other natural bodies, all hollow at the heart, decayed and rotten on the inside, for all its hardness or coat of mail on the out, which may support and keep it erect for a while, but will be found altogether insufficient, and incapable of doing so for any considerable time. These circumstances make it out pretty clear that Bath stone and cheese are very near akin, for as the latter acquires its coat by standing in the air, so does the former also, and much about a time too. Again, as the least water or degree of moisture spoils and rots cheese, so 'tis plain the effects are the same in this sort of stone, which, by the influence of the sun, may also in time produce the very maggots of an analogous body, or something very like them. For these reasons and the other defects in this material, the ancients did not trust their grand buildings, at least not their decorations and capital ornaments, to the work of natural stone of any kind, but being well acquainted with all other products of nature, we are at no loss to find out an extraordinary tie, a peculiar cement for binding of clay together, so as to make an artificial stone far superior, both in strength and beauty, to the best and hardest natural stone, by the means of which artificial composition they beautified and adorned at the cheapest rate, in the quickest way, and after the most elegant manner, their great structures of all sorts, which, by the same means, they made so strong and durable that no time has been able to efface them. No, by their artificial stone they have most ingeniously prevented all the mischiefs of time itself. Witness the noble edifices and magnificent old buildings, which all places of the world have still to show in evidence of this truth. But, to our regret and the world's loss, the knowledge and art of the ancients in this affair, their secret and mystery in this particular, as in many other things, have died and been buried with themselves. What a pity it is that, with the old Romans, so many valuable secrets, and this among the rest, should have perished and been lost to the world. Many ages have already suffered, and future times will have reason to remember the effects of this unspeakable loss. However, yet, in my humble opinion, that is not all we have to be sorry for upon this head. We have certainly as good reason to bemoan the low ebb of industry since those times, and indeed to grieve that succeeding ages have not been as inventive and fruitful of contrivances. Nor, to speak freely, can I think it commendable in us to sit down quietly and content under such very considerable losses, as the world has suffered in those respects. 'Tis bad husbandry and the want of manure that render lands barren, and it is industry and the exercise of the mind alone that make invention fruitful. These serious considerations put me, prompted as I was by a warm inclination, upon the most laborious search, upon the tedious trial of many experiments, and upon the reiterated experiments of many odd things, many various preparations and different compositions, in order to find out the old tie, the fixed cement of the ancients. I say I was instigated by, I know not what, natural impulse to examine narrowly and dive as deep as I could into the nature of clays of all sorts, and into the quality of many other, both natural and artificial, bodies, in order to recover both natural and artificial bodies, in order to recover the vast loss, this precious loot or soldier. And as in this great work of wide scrutiny, I was happily assisted by industrious genius, so I left no stone unturned, to bring about my wish and to accomplish my purpose. And when I found that this part of natural knowledge was not to be met with among the learned, the virtuosos, and great masters of arts in Europe, I quickly resolved and went into Asia and African Turkey to see what I could learn from and pick up among the Turks and the race of the old Egyptians, relating to the same affair, and this I was the more readily induced to do, considering the fame of this most ancient people for the invention of all arts and sciences. The Egyptians of old were so sensible of the use and benefit, and so renowned for the make of this same artificial stone, that they employed more than 600,000 men in this way for several centuries. However, our interpreters have been pleased to call this sort of stone that the Israelites were so employed in by the name of bricks. Yet I must here observe that several of the most eminent writers of Egyptian antiquities, as well as Hermes Trismegistus himself, Xenophon, Herodote, Suidas, and others, call it expressly artificial stone, a composition of earths and artificial cements, and as they further describe it, must differ vastly from the bricks of our days, and consequently be the same with my affair in hand. Witness the many considerable remains of antiquity, the numbers of towers, the stately pillars, the curious obelisks, some still standing and near the ancient Alexandria, Grand Cairo, etc. The Egyptian pyramids, commonly called King Pharaoh's Hills, those famous artificial stone monuments of antiquity, which devouring time can never consume. The famous bust called Sphinx, all one stone, adjacent to the biggest pyramid, representing the face and breasts of a woman whose head, according to Pliny, is 130 feet in circumference and 43 long, can scarce be supposed to be one of our modern bricks. But to my purpose, I say, when I found that one place of the world could not satisfy my curiosity, nor thoroughly inform my judgment, I made no scruple to visit another, where, however I can no more say, I met with what I now know and practice concerning this affair than I did at home. And yet, for all this, every country, every place, lent me a lift, gave me some useful hint, which always afforded my fancy fresh supplies of thoughts, and laid open a new scene of experiments to my view, till at last, after a long series of wandering troubles and fatigues, and after spending and making through a pretty small fortune, as well as the best part of my time, Providence, which I believe withholds nothing, no blessing from the diligent and industrious, was pleased to let me into the admirable secret. A secret, I call it, because, to my knowledge, no man, this day alive, has it, or knows it but myself. A secret whose just value, excellency, and use will be better known to succeeding generations than to the present times. However, I must acknowledge that this affair has not always been the same even in my own hands, for, like all projectors, I've been extremely fond of several of my own inventions, and often thought myself secure of the grand secret, in short, before my time. This indeed is the common case of the generality of rash enterprisers whose wild schemes are never to be reduced to solid practice. For my own part, I ingenuously confess that I found myself many a time mistaken. 'Tis but a few years since I was so sure and forward in my opinion as to make an open experiment of some pipes, which, though strong enough for common aqueducts, as they afterwards proved, yet undertaking too much and attempting to raise great quantities of water to considerable heights, the violent pressure of the air joined to the overbearing force of the water made them give way and burst. And no wonder, for disproportioned power or stress will affect the strongest bodies. There's no fence against violence. In the meantime, I've been taken up, ever since, in finding out and mending what I've judged faulty at that trial, in devising a certain method to prevent, as far as possible, such accidents for the future. And this I've at last done to my wish and full satisfaction, by altering some of my ingredients and all of their proportions. Now, as to the nature and quality of what I shall call my secret composition, it, briefly then, consists of such ingredients as are, by a strong heat of fire, reduced to a state of fluidity, melted and run down into a most compact, solid mass, according to the shape and dimensions of the given model. I say my composition consists of such ingredients as, when hot, have a natural tendency to fluidity and vitrification, and when cold, consolidate into the hardest stone, and turn into one absolute and perfect vitreous substance. Thus, by the means of a few simple ingredients, I am able to run down my clays, or even the hardest rock in England, and craft them in the aligned molds, as fast as the lead man do their most fluid metal. For so long as the particles of my materials are in a disposition to motion, gliding over one another's surfaces all manner of ways, from the sphericity of their own figures, they'll take the impression and assume the form of anything proposed in the same easy and expeditious manner as lead is known to do. But that I may be still better understood, I say my ingredients are naturally made up of the most solid spherical particles, which however are, by a certain degree of heat, to be wrought upon and put into a circular motion or ebullition, and by the contrary degree of cold, are to be reduced to the most compact solid body. For, as the intervention of the fiery particles disjoins and separates the constituent parts and reduces them into a fluid, so when this motion ceases and the fluxibility is over, the corpuscles come near enough again to feel the power of one another's attractions. And then there's also an intervention of frigorific matter, which at the same time strongly attracts them, and is again itself strongly attracted by them. These joined forces thus fix and wedge down the whole mass into the most firm and solid substance, into the most strong and compact body. This is the produce of my secret composition, and this is what I now call my artificial stone. Artificial stone then being thus produced, and being to supply the place, make up the defects, guard against the faults, and answer many of the ends of natural stone. It may be proper to insist a little upon this too, in order to explain briefly the nature and property of this artificial substance, to account here for its extraordinary qualities, by sound reason, and to give in its place convincing proof, ocular demonstration of what may be said in this. In doing of which, I confess, I shall be put to it, for as I don't set up for a profound scholar of any kind, so I've often found in myself what I've seen also verified in others, namely, that the human mind is more capable of conceiving just ideas than the tongue is of explaining them. The mind may be satisfied and convinced of many truths that the tongue labors under the greatest difficulty to make out. Not but that I know some men's best tastes lie in their tongues, as those of others do in their heads, but left I should be thought to obtrude some unaccountable novelty upon the world, I say that from the smallness and sphericity of the constituent particles, and from the adventitious impulse of strong heat and fire, they are rapidly agitated all manner of ways, and variously struck against one another, and thus the matter, producing my artificial stone, acquires the property of fluidity. I have also observed before, so soon as this agitation or motion ceases, and by the intervening cold, the same parts draw near again to one another, for the particles of all matter do draw and attract one another with a certain degree of force. Then they come within a certain distance, and this attractive force acts most intently. When the corpuscles touch one another, as in this case they do, again 'tis to be understood that in all component bodies, the attractive power is proportionable to their density or solidity. The more solid, consequently, their particles are, the more powerfully they do attract. Attraction being then in all bodies as their solidities, may be hence concluded that all spheric corpuscles, caeteris paribus, have the strongest attraction, and the reason is plain, because there is more solidity under such a surface than in any other figure. Consequently, from these two requisites of sphericity and solicity, which are the special adherent properties of every atom in my composition, the attraction must needs be very great, and, of course, the cohesion of its parts very strong. Cohesion of parts, I repeat, because 'tis on this principle that the different degrees of the strength of all bodies depend. But here, I would have it further understood that the attractive force by which all bodies cohere is much greater in immediate contact, which is precisely the case of my ingredients, in this state than any distance, how small soever, for as the several degrees of the cohesion of parts and the several degrees of the solidity and strength of all bodies depend upon and arise from the several degrees or quantities of the contact of the constituent particles, so these particles touching any body whatever, the force by which they tend towards that body, or the force by which they adhere to it, is always proportional to the quantity or degree of contact. for such particles as lie remote from the place of contact can add nothing to the cohesion nor consequently to the strength of any body. Now, if these principles be just, as I hope they'll be found upon review, then 'tis manifest that the primary parts of my secret composition are capable of the most powerful attraction, and the component particles of my artificial stone of the strictest cohesion. Of course, then it necessarily follows that this same substance, this stone, contains in itself and is endued with the strongest passive principle. And if this be so, 'tis consequently capable to resist powerfully all manner of change or alteration of state, which, I think, is all that can be wished for to confirm the strength and duration of any body whatsoever, granting still that this resistance is always proportional to the quantity of matter contained in it, and to the substantial density of the given body. Upon the whole, in short, if Sir Isaac Newton and others were right in pronouncing all effects to be proportional to their adequate causes, then I'm sure I cannot be wrong in what I've here laid down and undertaken to maintain, namely, in a word, that my artificial stone is more strong and durable than the best natural stone. My composition, in fine, ties down, binds together, and unites the parts of any given body much more closely and strictly than nature does those of common stone, and consequently renders whatever is made of its produce infinitely more compact, firm, and solid than anything made of natural stone can possibly be or come up to. It has also been hinted that my ingredients have a tendency to vitrification, which is but a necessary consequence of what has been advanced, and is another advantage arising from the particles of the fluid, their shooting together in such an extraordinary close manner. This is a proof of what I've been saying, and shows us plainly how near, how immediate the contact, how great, how powerful the attraction, and how firm, how dense the cohesion of all the parts of this body must needs be before vitrification can succeed. How strongly must every atom be combined, and how closely must every particle be joined and knit together before this can happen. I call it another advantage, too, in regard that this disqualifies and divests the body, whether great or small, of all suction, and after the manner of glass, enables it to resist and shoot off all degrees of wet, rain, and moisture, and, what's more, renders it impenetrable by air as well as by water. Thus, I hope I've given some tolerable account of my artificial stone, as well as of my secret composition, and advanced some good reasonings, too, for its extraordinary strength and duration. But because reasons are only presumptive, no reason, how plausible soever, amounting to proof without what's commonly called demonstration, it may be asked what proofs, what demonstrations I can give to support my arguments, and how I propose to convince the doubtful and the dissident, and make it appear manifest to all men that my stone is harder and stronger than common stone. To this I answer, if seeing by any ground for believing, I can be at no loss in this respect, no more than in t'other, I can give the most satisfactory proofs by ocular demonstrations, by experiments of facts of several kinds, such as no man shall be able to refuse to admit in evidence, nor to deny, as full and clear conviction of this truth, that in all respects belonging to the ornaments and ornamental part of buildings, my artificial stone is preferable to the best of common natural stone. However, as I'm not busy writing to such as many come and see, so I shall not give my distant reader any long detail here of what can only be best credited by sight. Curiosity will move such as are upon the spot, and have occasion to satisfy themselves, for all that I can either say or write. It would then be foreign to my purpose and design either to make a long business of this paper, or to fill up what I intend only for about half hours reading with useless narratives, which notwithstanding, as I reserve some variety of proofs for the testimony of men's own senses according to what may be seen upon the place, so I must not leave my friends in the country altogether unsatisfied. I must therefore beg leave to convey, if possible, some further notion of the affair to the minds, and this I propose to do sundry ways. And, first, by taking two pieces, the one the best Portland stone, cut down to the exact dimensions of the other artificial stone, placing both in a just horizontal position and lying clear in their middles with equal bearings at their ends, then loading them gradually with weights hung exactly in their centers till both break down. This done, the difference is incredible. Modesty will not suffer me to speak on't. This is better believed when seen than told. Only, in general, I'll venture to say, I can bring my stone to what pitch or degree of strength I please, and in proportion to its superiority of strength, it must, in the course of reasoning, be allowed to outlast any natural stone whatsoever a proportionable time. Secondly, as I make palisades or fences of all sorts and sizes, it has been objected that my composition is thought a friable substance, and will prove brittle for this design, and that such as are made of it will not be able to stand out the little shocks and accidents to which they are commonly liable. To this I answer that my palisades are no more brittle than those made of cast iron, which must be allowed to be a very brittle substance, and yet all the rails or pales in use are made either of this or wood. In evidence of which assertion, I'll engage that a joint of mine will hold out blow for blow, or any other manner of experiment with one of equal dimensions made of cast iron. A third instance of the excelling strength of my stone is, that no knife, no edged tool, nor mallet and tool, nor hammer and chisel will so much as touch it, whereas all sorts of natural stone are wrought upon and easily cut down by the simplest edge. I say the artificial stone is, by exceeding strong heat, made so hard in testimony of its strength that no edged tool whatsoever can possibly affect it, whereas the common natural stone may be rubbed and rasped down by any trifling instrument. In the fourth place, I don't know any stronger proof that can be given on this head than that the artificial stone and all goods made of my composition do bear and stand out the greatest heats, the severest shocks of fire, and the strongest and fiercest fuel in England can give them. They must needs to undergo this fiery trial for several days and nights running, whereas no natural stone whatsoever can possibly bear this. Not one of them, known to me, is able to resist the force but of a common fire. Half an hour long, they do not only crack, but presently fly to in pieces. From these premises, I shall draw the following certain conclusion, namely that, if my goods are strong enough to bear fire, such fire as is above described, then there can be no doubt, no danger, but that they will hold and stand out all sorts of weather. If this extremity of fire don't touch them, I'm sure no weather can hurt them. But this I know, further too by some short experience. I say my experience in this case is indeed but short, because I can produce nothing of above 5 or 6 years standing. But considering the severity of winter in 1728 to 29, and the variety of all sorts of trying weather we had in it, besides the hardest frost that we'd had for 15 years before, it cannot be thought a trifling instance of this argument, that my goods bid defiance to all the violence of weather, as well as to the powers of fire. And if so, that no weather nor fire itself can affect them, then it also necessarily follows that no time can hurt them. All-consuming time time which wears out and sweeps off everything, all substances, all bodies whatsoever, animate and inanimate, must let them stand still, untouched, unmolested, and for this I can plead a little longer experience, and I hope satisfy my reader too in this great truth, without referring to Diodor, Mela, Strabo, and others, as also without sending him to Egypt, Italy, or any other foreign country for his conviction, especially since there are many sufficient proofs to be met with in Old England. I shall only mention 3 or 4 that either are or ought to be universally well known. First then, what can we think of that glorious monument of antiquity called Mons Ambrosi, unsure if I'm saying that correctly, or Stonehenge, on the plain, about 6 miles from Salisbury, consisting of vast huge stones, some 28 foot high and 7 broad, with such proportionable thickness that no manner of carriage could possibly bring them there, nor can it be alleged that the place produced them, for there's not a stone, great or small, to be found within some miles around. The famous Camden, Baker Wilkins, and others are of my mind that they are the produce of the ancient art, artificial stones made upon the spot. Secondly, the trophy or monument of Rolric stones set in circular compass, not unlike others near Whitney in Oxfordshire, are by historians called the same composition, as is thirdly the trophy erected at Boskenna in Cornwall, consisting of 18 such stones with the biggest in the middle, and fourthly on the river Eden near Salkeld in Cumberland there's a most remarkable trophy commonly called Long Meg and her daughters, consisting of 77 such stones, each 10, and Meg herself no less than 15 foot above ground. All our antiquarians, all our historians agree in this, that these are artificial, not common stones. But as to the times of these respective monuments being erected, they leave us in the dark. Consequently, no man can pretend to know how many ages they've already stood, though we may all conclude they'll last as long as the earth itself. I shall but add one other instance, and that is within the city of London, namely the monument and effigy of the famous John Stow, in the north aisle of the church of St. Andrew, Undershaft, which, for as ordinary a substance as 'tis, no way comparable to mine, has made a shift to last 125 years and may much longer. But besides my own authority, Mr. Stripe in his, I guess in his survey on page 14 says, this figure of Stow, which seems to be stone, I have been told by Mr. Bagford, an ingenious person in antiquities, is nothing else but clay burnt and painted. He calls it a fine art, known and practiced in former times, and adds that there were several such monuments in the churches of London before the Great Fire, and particularizes some of them. I need not go further on this head, for say what I will, it can amount to no more than what has already been sufficiently made out, that barring accidents to which all things are subject, none of the 4 elements nor time itself can ever hurt or damage the fabric of my artificial stone. In the last place, I hope 'twill not tend to the discredit of my undertaking, nor leave much ground for incredulity as to what has been, or may yet be, said in its favor, that I can tell the world I have some gentlemen of honor and fortune concerned with me in this affair, gentlemen of learning and ingenuity too, that have taken all possible pains to satisfy and convince themselves of the truth of what I have above advanced, and of all that I shall pretend to advance upon the subject. Gentlemen that have, rather out of great and generous public spirit than any other motive, countenanced and encouraged it as a most useful and ingenious project, and, in fine, brought it to what it is now. These worthy persons have, upon this conviction with great care and concern, nursed it up and maintained it at a pretty expensive rate, till now, that it can walk alone. Now they are about to usher into the world for the good of the public as well as for that of itself, and that it may push its fortune the better, they are determined not to stint it in any necessary allowance, nor to stick it at any charge that may contribute to its deserved success. This revolution of the proprietors, for so I now call them, is no less noble than the undertaking is great. And as they have thought fit to sow in plenty, there is a probability of their reaping in abundance. The secret, which has cost me so dear, is their own and their successors forever. Having now thus at large discussed the chief topics of my discourse, I shall descend to points of an inferior nature, and the first to be touched upon this place is lead, which has had a numerous body of patrons, for no other reason but because of its cheapness and coming so considerably below the price of stone in the ornaments of houses and gardens. For take it in any other senses, and Portland stone has every way the advantage of this soft and loose body. Lead of all metals has the loosest and the softest texture. The component parts of lead are easily separated. They give easy way to every impulse. Because of all metallic substances, it has the least cohesion or contact of parts. And the contacts of lead being few and small, the texture is easily moved and wrought upon by the least external force of any kind. If the particles of fire intervene, or if the effluvia of the sun rush in upon it, provided they be hot and strong enough, either of these will disjoin the parts of any leaden substance, and put the whole body, whatever it is, in fusion. I have seen lead melt away by the heat of vapor only. In this country, where the sun is not so very hot, it first blisters only, and next frets and decays quickly. However, 'tis certain that here, as well as elsewhere, the sun, as well as the fire, gains easy admission betwixt all the particles of lead, and 'tis as certain that the effluvia even of our English sun reams have very visible effects upon all leaden bodies within the sphere of their activity, though no doubt this depends more or less upon the heart of the seasons, for by their subtlety and electricity they make a sensible diminution of the weight of those soft and weak substances, and by their vast attracting force they surmount all degrees of gravity and produce various other effects, such as melting, blistering, fretting, moldering, etc. But here it may be also observed that all such accidents are the more or less considerable, and happen sooner or later too, according to the substantial density of the work, and in proportion to the quantity of stuff contained in it. For thin, light, and slight bodies, such as the figures commonly made for sale, must needs go very quickly to pot. For the leaden figures makers, striving everyone to undersell his neighbor, drive this business to a hair, and this metal being a rising commodity, they're obliged to do so. Again, besides all that happens afterwards, as above, to the goods made of lead, there are a great many accidents that they are liable to in the very casting and molding. Witness the many faults, galls, and blemishes to be seen, even when new, in almost every considerable piece, and the cankerings, rusting, and falling away, and even the strongest leaden bodies, after standing some time in the weather. All which notwithstanding, I know there are several arguments commonly used in favor of lead, which I shall endeavor to answer briefly in a few words. First, then, it is said for lead, that after all, happen what will, 'tis always worth something, and will still fetch the price of lead. Upon this account, I would advise such gentlemen to weigh and compute the value of their metal at buying. Then they'll soon find how little proportion this will bear to the price of the goods demanded, which are always rated by the artificers according to the size and work of the mold or model after which they're made. If this work be anything tolerable to the eye, it makes the intrinsic value of the stuff, but an inconsiderable article in the price, as anyone may be easily convinced of that has a mind to try. Secondly, another thing advanced in behalf of lead is the neatness and beauty, which I allow to be just. As the molds are, the goods may be, with some allowances, but here I must again observe that they know who value lead on this account know nothing of what can be done in artificial stone. No substance whatsoever can so easily command or so readily acquire the beauty or nicety of the shape and figure of any assigned body, and this can do. In short, I may venture to say that no pencil can sketch out finer or draw the design better than I'm able to produce the same in solid matter. Thirdly, the price, the cheapness of leadenware, leaden figures, is generally urged in its favor, and indeed 'tis this that has raised it to a place in almost all the gardens of England. And here again I must acquaint my reader that, as in all other respects, I hope 'tis clear my stone has the advantage of this soft metal. So in this particular too, it can never be behind with lead. My ingredients are to be had in several parts of England, though not all in the same place, which notwithstanding, my composition is of no extraordinary charge, and the preparing and working parts are both easily and expeditiously performed. What can then hinder it to outdo lead? Even in price too, surely we are able to undersell lead by much more than the lead casters can afford to undersell the stone carvers. I mean in regard to the ornaments made of Portland stone. Those made of Bath are not worth our notice. Besides, as our charge is not so great, nor our accidents so many, so neither are our losses and damages by fire so considerable as the figure makers. This leads me to another observation upon my own work, which I think also proper to take notice of in this place. Namely, if there be any mistake in the preparation or error in the composition or flaw in the working, or, in short, if any degree of faulty work passes through my men's hands through inadvertency, carelessness, or other ways, here in the fire 'tis discovered. Here it immediately shows itself. The fire is my best check upon them, and the fiery trial is to me, all in all, the same as to the gold and silversmiths, the essay of all my works. I can safely depend upon the full strength and sufficiency of all goods that come safe and sound without flaw or blemish out of the fire. But as all business is liable to contingencies, so is this too. And as in chemistry, so also in this, what passes through the various processes and comes to petrification must make up for what it falls short and lies by the way. Servants will be negligent, and workmen of all trades will play tricks, but none of mine shall ever have it in their power to huddle up a faulty piece of goods. I have had one instance of this kind. I know and acknowledge it, and but one only, among all parcels of goods I've sold these 5 or 6 years past, and this, to be plain, fell out of the Honorable Mr. Secretary Johnston, who bought a considerable quantity in which there happened to be one single piece thus faulty and glossed over. However, as a little trick soon showed itself, and as upon discovery I satisfied that curious gentleman, to whose patronage I'm extremely obliged, by setting up another in its room, so I shall endeavor to please all others that do me the honor to deal with or employ me. I shall take all possible care that no such accidents shall ever happen again, nor that any such imposition shall ever succeed any more. 'Tis not enough that I am master of a valuable secret, nor indeed would this signify much, was it not to be carried on with honestly and faithfully executed. They that know the pains I've taken for so many years to bring this affair to bear might justly reproach me as an arrant fool, if after all I should ever put it to the power of my workmen or laborers to damn it. No, by strict care and diligence, I hope to make this both impracticable and impossible. But if in spite of all care and contrary to all probability, any insufficient or faulty work should ever be found to come out of my hands, I am answerable. I shall make it good and do the purchaser, whoever he be, ample justice. The second, and indeed the only remaining point to be treated in this place, is clay ware, commonly called potter's ware. This leads me now to explain briefly the nature of clays, so far as they relate to the business in hand. 'Tis then the well-known property of clay, while wet and moist, to take readily what form or figure soever you please to give it, as is evident from the vast variety of goods made by the potters. But here we must advert that their business consists only in small crockery ware, whose substance is very thin, light, and slender, and is consequently easily wrought up and managed, whereas in thick, solid, and ponderous bodies, the case differs in all respects. For to say nothing of their working, molding, drying, etc., so soon as they come to the burning part, they crack and fly about their ears like hailstones, and that even in common fires, and thus it happens to them for want of good dry stuff, proper ingredients to mix with their clays. But in order to remedy this evil and to supply this defect in their low affairs, they've fallen upon sand as the only medium fit for their purpose. And this sand, again, they find, subjects them to a double inconveniency. For if they thus incorporate a small quantity, not only the fire and the weather, but the very air will tear their goods to pieces, as above. And if a large quantity be added, the sand renders the whole so rotten and crumbly that the goods fail and molder away, even in their common standing, wherever placed. And now, what's here to be done in order to make those faulty goods saleable? Why, the most considerable broken or cracked off pieces are to be joined again as well as they can, and the lesser faults are to be filled or made up again with what they call putty. And then the whole body, whether great or small, is to be licked or painted over, the better still to conceal the cheat. 'Twas by these very means of putty and paint that my own men imposed upon myself in Mr. Johnston's parcel before mentioned. I'm ready to detect and lay open this great fraud as becomes an honest man, and for my own part am resolved, if possible, to prevail with such gentlemen as favor me with their commissions, to be present as well as myself at the drawings of the kilns, that they may see their goods in puris naturalibus, and as they come out of the fire, for the ingredients of my composition are such as not only do the offices of the dry substances required and supply my clays with the necessary dryness, but are so far from weakening and prejudicing in any respect the goods either in or out of the fire, that to what degree or quantity soever they're skillfully used, they of themselves add a vast degree of strength to such goods, strength and beauty too, infinitely superior to what they could any other ways possibly acquire. Here, in these very dry and drying substances of my composition, are contained the binding and uniting particles of excessive strength, and here too lies a greater part of my secret, in that the more of this dry substance that's put among the clays, the stronger the goods are and must needs be, their degrees of strength depending entirely on the greater or lesser quantity of these ingredients. And hence 'tis that I say I can raise all my goods to what pitch, to what excess of strength I please to bestow upon them. In this place, and upon this point, I think it my duty to be a little more particular, because 'tis from this quarter that I find the public as well as myself will have most to apprehend. Here the impositions are like to be the grossest, and in this the unwary will be most liable to be deceived. But in order to make this flagrant truth still the more notorious, I think myself obliged not to smother, conceal, or pass over in silence, but to give the world a full and succinct account of the villainous attempts that have been seen, that have been already made upon me and my secret. Not that I have much to fear from imitation, or imposture of any kind. No rogue is worth the notice of an honest man, and yet, for all this, when men turn grossly impudent, it may be allowable to check them, as in this place. It may be convenient for me to say something on the following matter of fact, not so much to defend my scheme, which wants no defense, nor to justify myself, who can defy the world to lay anything to my charge, but simple honesty and eager industry in the pursuit of my project, as to advertise and to put the public upon its guard against all pretenders to my art. But lest I should be thought to censure hard or determine partially in my own favor, I shall say no more, but without pique or prejudice to any man. For my own part, appeal to the world, and for my counterfeit refer him and his conduct to the impartial reader of the following account, which is extracted from some authenticated papers to this purpose. About the beginning of August 1729, a certain pretending architect, a meddling busy man, who shall be nameless so long as matters stand as they do, thought fit to make use of all manner of little artifices in order to come at or find out the secret of my affair. And for this end my servants, my journeymen, were tampered with many different ways and decoyed into public houses, that being drunk, they might be the more easily sifted and imposed upon. At other times opportunities were taken in my absence, and people went over to the water to my workhouse, and there pretended to be the proprietors or partners with me, and consequently masters over my workmen, promising, as such, to favor them and augment their wages. These and all other such like devices were used to deceive and inveigle the unwary men, so that they suffered themselves to be very narrowly examined over and over again, both together and one by one, and touching my affairs, my secret, my ingredients, materials, mixtures, utensils, and all the particular processes and general methods of managing and carrying on my works, innumerable and endless questions in their own words were put to them and asked of them, the said workmen, to all which, continuing their own words, we thought of no harm, we feared no treachery, nor suspected any roguery, and therefore answered as fully as we could, however, without pretending to give the least account of or information about our master's secret, or the secret ingredients used in his composition, which being carefully kept in his own breast only, for what we know, at least as we ourselves were never let into the knowledge of these things, we could not possibly divulge them to others. But what is still more remarkable than all this, the same person had the cunning to draw in some of my particular friends, gentlemen of honor and probity, to be aiding and assisting in his vile designs, to pass over many material circumstances contained in the originals. I shall only observe here that by their very means, and under the presence of holding a considerable share and advancing the interest of the undertaking, he procured several meetings with myself, till at last, finding that I was not altogether so easy to be canvassed and sifted as my men, he had the modesty to tell me to my face that my project was exceeding good, excellent, advantageous, but if I would not comply with what he called reasonable terms and forthwith give him an absolute right and title to 1/8 share in my undertaking, he would set up against me and carry on the same enterprise in opposition to me, vowing and swearing at the same time that no patent should protect me from his attempts, for by ways and means he'd know how to elude or set aside any patent whatsoever. In a country of so much liberty as England, patents were easily broke through under the pretense of setting up some other affair, or even the same thing under another name. And to others he boasted of what he had done, and could not conceal his own shame. The mean tricks he had been guilty of, the very tricks by which he confessed that he had pumped and squeezed, as he called it, out of these men, all my secret, pretending that he had now found it all out, so as to know as much or more of my affair of artificial stone than myself. But here 'tis to be minded that the design of this ostentation was to draw them into a secret of his own, for he attacked the same persons in a few days' time, both by words and writing, to enter into a new scheme with himself, and gave them too some chimerical computations, which he said were as just as the light, promising them by this demonstration, as he called it, immense advantages, such as no man ever did, or ever will make good. But these gentlemen, to whom he made his first application, knowing the origin of the pilfered scheme, did not think fit to be concerned in it. They told him they would have nothing to do with him. They did not incline to give him the fingering of any of their money. However, upon this foundation, for as slender and base as 'twas, and from my own proposals and experiments, whereof he had got a copy from one of my friends, he went to work, drew out and published some medley advertisements, and got also some other delusive paragraphs slyly inserted into the public newspapers, with design, I suppose, to draw me into a concession, if not others into a scrape. I don't know how he succeeded in the latter, but as to the former, all his artifice had no other effect on me than to confirm me in the resolution I had taken to have nothing to do with this man upon any terms. However, as he's a person of an incomparable stock, I doubt not but, as one bait fails, he'll hook another, and so long as matters continue in status quo, he shall meet with no interruption on my part. Whereas, if he offers to run his lengths again, both he and I know what is in my power when I have occasion to make use on't, besides 3 original affidavits to confirm in the most authentic manner every word above written, and many more infamous circumstances, of which, however, I scorn to take any more notice, unless I find myself obliged to it. I'm heartily sorry for this digression, and still more so, for that I'm under a necessity to take some notice of it in this such place, and to trouble the reader with such a scandalous account of any man. But considering all things, I hope 'tis excusable, especially since the chief thing aimed at here is to warn and put the public upon its guard, for it may be supposed that even after all, a man of this front will stick at nothing. Again, further, in my humble opinion, the least compliment I owe to the great and noble patron of this treatise, and the least satisfaction I can give to the worthy gentlemen proprietors of this undertaking, is to set the affair in a clear light, and to leave as little ground as reason for cavil or contest. And for myself too, I must add, that however vile practices and impositions will be carried on, as they've always been, yet it don't become me, or any honest man, to connive at them, more to have part in them, but to return. My business in hand is to show what I myself can do, rather than what others cannot perform. Meddling is not my province, nor does it at all suit my quiet inclinations. Only, I would not have fraud and deceit to stand in the way of candor and ingenuity, nor the foul devices of imposture to make head against the fair labors of art. This, I say, becomes all good men, as far as in them lies, to prevent, because this carries with it a double prejudice to the world. First, as 'tis not only a great discouragement, but also a real obstacle to the progress of the sciences themselves, and to all manner of ingenuity in general. Secondly, as by this means, the world, in a lump, is or may be bubbled, and after praying too dear for experience, the cheat is detected. Then, because of this, for being once deceived, the generality of men will make difficulties, and narrow souls will never trust again. For a knave's taking up a paltry sum of money, and not repaying it, an honest man shall not be able to borrow a shilling, though his life, as well as his credit, was at stake for it. Because of the many bubbles that of late years have been obtruded upon the public, I might have perished, and my secret with me, for all the fairest offers and plainest demonstrations I was capable to make, had not Providence very accidentally directed and introduced me to the conservation and acquaintance of a most worthy person, a man of the strictest principles and most extensive knowledge, perfectly well versed in the qualities of all terrene and subterranean bodies, and consequently no stranger to the powers of cements, whether natural or artificial, nor indeed to the nature of my whole affair. And, as in all other cases, 'tis better to have to do with one man of knowledge and understanding than with 20 that know nothing of the matter. So here too I found the easiest ingress. This gentleman wanted little more than a hint for his satisfaction and conviction, as he was a good judge of all the various effects and operations of natural bodies. So the smallest item led him in a moment to comprehend the whole mystery of my secret, though the particulars he often advised, and always bid me to keep to myself. To him, then, in short, who shall be nameless, for modesty's sake, my own and the success of this undertaking is entirely owing. For he first set the wheel a-going, the wheel which will never more stand still, but the better 'tis known, the faster 'twill run. And the run of this affair will depend upon the general knowledge of its great worth, its just value, and the extraordinary qualities of my artificial stone, which no gloss of words can possibly set off so well as the undertaking really and truly deserves. Now at last it may be proper to enter upon particulars, and the public may desire to know the particular application of this artificial stone. I mean, to what uses and purposes it is, or may be, particularly converted. But on this head, I find I've no occasion to enlarge. A good round catalogue of these has already been published for me by the great industry of another, and runs as follows: columns, pedestals, entablatures, cornices, pediments, balustrades, statues, rustics, fascias, copings of walls and chimneys, chimney pieces, hearthstones, architraves, frontispieces of doors, windows, alcoves and grottos, cascades, obelisks, arches, piazzas, keystones, steps, pavements, urns, balls, etc. To all which particulars, then, I shall only add a few most material articles, such as tombstones, monuments, sundials, crests for doors, gates and gateways, statuary of all sorts, pipes of all bores and sizes for the conveyance of water at all distances, as good and strong as any ever made by the Romans, of which we are provided also with the demonstration. I have now by me a piece or two made of this same substance with mine, that were taken up last year out of the sewer at Charing Cross, which by all computation of time must have lain there many ages, and looks now as fresh and sound as is actually as hard and firm as the first day, which I think amounts to another proof of the strength and duration of my preparation. In short, that it may endure to the last day, and that my composition is no ways inferior to it, is also manifestly demonstrable. In fine, without going about to describe or descant upon innumerable particulars, I shall only say in general that whatever is or may be made of cut stone, of lead, or of cast iron for the embellishment of houses and gardens, I am able to make out of my composition of artificial stone, shall run no comparisons with either of those substances, nor with the goods made of either of them, because I hope it is truly evident that mine have in all respects the advantage and a vast superiority of to others. I fancy I need say no more to confirm this truth. The superior strength is accounted for, the superior beauty is conspicuous, and the prices are fixed as near as I can, to about 1/3 part of the price of stone, and 1/2 of the price of lead, and that no mistakes or impositions may happen. Come who will to buy, all shall meet with the same good usage. All shall be served alike. They shall find the lowest price marked upon every piece of the goods, and the goods, not bespoke or commissioned, are to be seen and sold at the place, commonly called Holts Ware or Workhouse, opposite to Torque Building's stairs in the Strand and near Cooper's Bridge in Lambeth. There's also a show of goods on the gable end towards the river that will direct to the house, where at any time when the water is above or about half flood, gentlemen may land at the very door and have nothing to do but to step or set their foot out of the boat into the house. The goods are only to be sold for ready money, and as they are or stand in the warehouse. But yet, though the goods burn of a beautiful white or freestone color or other ways, as I please to have them, if the natural colors don't take the eye of the buyer, and if so required, they shall be neatly painted, of what color soever the purchaser pleases, but then they're to be removed at his own charge. However, if it should be farther insisted upon that my workmen set up the goods so bought and sold, I design to oblige my customers also in this point, whether in town or country, they however always paying the man or men so employed their charges, and day or day's wages according to what I myself usually pay them. But if any parcel of goods is to be sent far off into the countries, then, and in this case, I propose to send along with them such particular directions as shall suffice and enable any careful workman, as well as my own, to set them up to the best advantage. And, as I have also good reason, even some assurances to expect encouragement for and from beyond seas, where, I doubt not, but my artificial stone and the goods, the ornaments made of it, will surprise as much and take as well as at home. It may be convenient to mention it here, and to assure all merchants or others having occasion to send them abroad, that there can be no difficulty in this circumstance of setting them up, by directions in any part of the world, as well, and to as much advantage as upon the spot. Nor can it be improper to inform the same gentleman that if these goods, these decorations of all sorts of buildings, be but well stowed in the hold, and the stowage on shipboard be but well contrived, they may be carried as safe to India as cross the Thames. I say, with a little more than ordinary care, they may be safely transported through all the world. In this place, it may be also proper to acquaint the reader that for the goods most in use, and for which the greatest demands are made, I keep a book of drafts which may be carried to persons of distinction upon occasion, that they may pick and choose and please themselves as to the models of what they want, in case the goods made should not hit their taste. But if any gentleman has a peculiar fancy or device of his own, I'll undertake to fit him to his mind. And upon leaving his drafts and giving his commission, the goods so bespoke shall be faithfully prepared and as exactly made and modeled after the designs given as the picture by the best limner shall be like the man. To conclude, I shall now only take leave to add, in a summary way, that whatever has been advanced in these sheets is free of all sinister views, without any intent to give offense, much less to injure any honest man in his lawful occupation or in the business of his trade. Far be this from me, but if I have had a wipe at another, a man full of new fangles that has already deserted several trades besides what he was bred to, and would be at taking up my art, if I have checked such one, I hope 'tis in moderation, and 'tis with a good meaning, to reclaim him and turn his head to something that he may be master of, because Jack of all trades was never good at any. I say 'tis neither my design nor desire to do prejudice to any man, my purpose being only to lay open to the public a most useful undertaking, to give the most rational and satisfactory account I can of it, to declare ingeniously what I know concerning it, and in short, to do what in me lies by fair and honest means to get the considerable sums that have been laid out upon it reimbursed. For the rest, if I've not handled my argument with the judgment of a scholar, or with the craft of a Jesuit, I hope the good-natured reader will forgive me in this, and pardon me in other respects. A man may be honest without great learning, and may speak truth without the help of rhetoric. I don't pretend to erudition, nor do I set up for other great things. All men have, or ought to have, the privilege of speaking their minds in their own way, and as well as they can, at least on the subject of their proper affairs. Though few are masters of the happy way, the happy turn of expression, one man talks well, another man means well. But in my humble opinion, natural logic, void of art, and stripped of all the flowers of oratory, sounds best among undesigning men. My greatest ambition is to be included in this number, and I have the happiness to be regarded as such by them that have some reason to know me. As for others, and that I may not be mistaken by any on account of the subject in hand, I shall briefly sum up the whole of what has been laid down in these pages with this, that however words or even reasonings may admit of censure or dispute, matter of fact can never err. Let the invidious turn it and wind it which way they please, matter of fact will still be the same. There's no arguing against this. That then my undertaking, my artificial stone and all the goods, the ornaments of architecture, the embellishments of buildings made of it, will answer the account and character I've endeavored to give them. I shall warrant, as in all other cases of life, I would rather be deceived than deceive. So in this too, I shall take it upon myself, both now and hereafter, to support and uphold all my goods, for any reasonable space of time, I might say, for any time, against all weathers, and against everything else that can be imputed to any insufficiency in themselves, accidents and violence only excepted. And finally, if contrary to this true meaning and to the intention of this just scheme, any fault or faulty piece of work shall ever be discovered to pass through my hands, then, and in this case, I shall be obliged to make good such faulty and insufficient work, either by putting up others in their room, or by returning the money paid for such goods. This, as I take it, not only amounts to another and to a new demonstration, and is as weighty a proof as any of the worth and strength of my artificial stone, but is also the best and fairest offer I'm capable to make, in evidence of the truth of the foregoing premise.